here I am with a quick rambling Saturday update on some miniature progress, painting and various other bits and pieces. I've got nothing here particularly planned, so I'll just talk, see where I get to and show you what I'm doing. So recently I've been doing a lot of the prep work and basing, priming, etc. on these 6mm miniatures. So these are 6mm scale, so they're very tiny. If you see my finger on there, the miniatures themselves are from GHQ, and they do a very fine range, all historical, so historical and current. So they've got your sort of World War II through to the various wars and the more recent modern technology used around the world as well. So they've got a very extensive range. You can see there straight away that the models have got incredible detail. That's a really good close-up of them there. Just give them a slight spin round so you can see them in motion. And the only thing I've done with these really differently from how they appear when purchased is add these small aerials in the top. Now, just for your information, those aerials are made from piano wire, and although you can't see the scars now, they're quite deadly. They're almost like sort of classic needles, really, in that if you push down too hard on those, they do puncture your skin very easily, which has happened to me now a couple of times. So something to watch out for if you do purchase piano wire. You also need a very fine drill bit, and I haven't got one left now because they're all broken, because the size of drill bit that you need is so fine that it does tend to get stuck in the metal unless you're very careful. So it's just something to look out for if you're doing the drilling and you're using a pin vise. Just take a lot of care, mostly for your health and safety. So I shall talk about these in a little more detail now. Now I've created them and what's going on. I've got quite a big stack that's not going to be visible to you here because I've got them on this big tray. I'm going to bring them over though so you can see what I mean. I've got a tray of these different models. So this is what they look like before they're painted up, and you can see I've put them on these steel bases, and I've done textured sort of sand on the bases as well, which has been glued on. And also you can just see there that in some places I've raised some bumps on there with slightly larger boulders. Now once that's all painted up and finally finished, it just gives it a little bit more interest on there rather than being just flat sand. Then I've used Tamiya light grey primer on these, and obviously they've been super glued onto the bases before the sand was put on there. They're super glued on. So a combination of some cleaning up, some drilling to get the aerials in, and then finally they've been grey primered as a base. On top of that grey primer I used an Israeli sand colour, which you can see is the sort of creamy sort of sand colour on that vehicle, and then I used a green from the Israeli sand was from a company called Life Colour, and then I used a green from Model Air from the Vallejo or Vallejo Model Air range, and that's very pale green, as you can see on there. So what I've done, which you can see why there's a difference between those two vehicles there, is I've used the filter here for NATO tanks. So if I move that around, you can see it's AK Interactive. Oh, that's better, you can see it there. Filter for NATO tanks by AK Interactive. Now that's a very light filter. In fact, I say previously it's probably quite similar to the neutral wash from MiG, but it has a little bit more of a orangey tinge in it. Not that obviously there's a label that's orange, but the brown itself in there is a bit more orangey, and that's an enamel filter, and I really like it actually for the 6mm scale, because it provides that very fine filter-like coating rather than going over the top. I think a lot of people are using that brown wash technique to speed up their painting, because you can put on a base colour, do a little bit of detailing, brown wash, sort of flick off the excess, and you've got a nicely shaded model. Of course, it can then start to look like a candy apple if you put too much of that dark brown on, and I think in the 6mm scale, because they're so fine, it's much nicer to go on with the fine filter, and it just brings the colours together a bit. It does provide some shading. See, what I did on this one is I've just not done it on there so that so you can see the difference. But if I pull that one away now and just show you the result of that, you can see that you're getting some shading into some of the detail areas. If I lift it up a small amount, you can see all around those tiny kind of rivets which are to do with that, I think that's called ablative armour. You can see that it's gone into them, and on the back it's just added some detail on there too, by going into the crevices. Obviously when I painted it on, I painted it completely over the model. I didn't go on too heavy with it either. I didn't want big pools of it on there. And I shall pull that tank away now and just show you what's been happening to this Israeli tank. That's actually not quite dry yet, so you can see the odd shiny patch on there. And again, it's try and get it into the middle for focus, and you can see the result there of putting that filter on means you get various areas, particularly between those very tiny panels on the top there. You can see the filter's gone in and darkened it. Now if I used a straight brown wash on there rather than the fine enamel filter, that would be very heavily loaded and probably a little bit too dark, and again it would start to take on that candy apple look. Probably going out of focus a wee bit there. That's better. So it's in progress really. The bases need doing. I'm going to do the aerials in a black. I'm going to go into the track areas there and make sure they get that sort of shiny metal with a slightly rusty look as well to the wheels underneath, and go from there. I'm going to show you something else in this range, these small little guys here as well. These are going to look nice when those tyres are done in a nice sort of matte black and grey to give them that sort of buffed look. And you can see again that the ink has gone, sorry, not the ink, but the filter wash has gone nicely. Actually, I'll tip it up a little bit so I can see it better here. You can see how it's gone in behind those hatches on the top of the vehicle really nicely. There's not too much more needed on the painting on here. I will put some little bits of highlights and maybe sort of some white dots along the corners and edges to bring them in a bit, but what's really going to finish these is things like doing, like, I think that's, I'm not sure if that's a petrol tank or what it is on the back there, but if I paint those in slightly different colours, make it look a bit rusty, a nice sharp black colour to the aerials, and some other spot details on there, particularly the tyres on this one as well. It'll look sweet, I think, when it's finished. So that's a very, very small scale models for you there. The earlier in the week, or a couple of weeks ago actually, I was doing these epic models and graduating the dark on the legs through to the light, which you can see on the top surfaces, using the Panzer Grey range of colours from Life Colour. I've actually now, if I show you just the top of these, if I flip it over, well, that one's a bit more better in focus. I've also now used the dark brown blue wash as well as the filter, and just gone into things like those panel lines on there. Again, it's just brought them out a bit nicer. Haven't really been making any more progress on these, but they will be part of an army I'm putting together. Obviously I've not used, I think I mentioned in my last video, I've not used the traditional epic colours in terms of Games Workshop. It's gone for Panzer Grey. So what else can I pop up there? Oh, there's some APCs that I've got as well. These very large ones, these Vietnam War US APCs. There's a very fine gun on the front there which probably needs straightening up, but I won't do that until I finish the model. You can see how the filter has gone in to the various nooks and crannies on there nicely. It's highlighted some of that nice detailing on the top. You can see the hatches, and yeah, it's got the front opening hatch on there as well. Obviously these were amphibious vehicles, so they could sort of drive up a river and up a seafront and then drop the people out like an enclosed landing vehicle. I've put 2 aerials in the back of there, and it's got some nice detail and even little lights and things on the back which will come out nicely when they're painted up. Oh, there's one last type of tank I've got here. I've got these US modern Abrams tanks. So I've gone for the 2 aerials. Now I play the game Battlefield 3 on the PlayStation, and you can pilot these tanks in there, and I noticed that the aerials are actually right along the edges, but I think I've got quite close in there with those 2 aerials. And obviously they're completely not to scale, because if you had a 6mm aerial that thick, it's more like an exhaust pipe or something than an actual aerial. But once you're looking at this from the tabletop, it should look quite nice. And again, you can see around the edge of the turret and in some of the detailing on the top that that filter has brought out that excellent detail on this GHQ model. And it's also toned down that green nicely. It's brought the green in line with the existing cream coloured Israeli sand colour in there. And just to sort of flash back to the one which I hadn't done, so you can see what they look like straight after the airbrush, you can see the difference again there, and how that NATO filter has really helped define the vehicle. Now I am going to go back probably with some brown washes right into the corners. It's going to get some weathering, and I've got the tracks and all the other detailing to do on there as well, so lots more work, but at least it's been a nice quick step to get them airbrushed and then have that additional filter applied, which brings them on quite nicely. In fact, I think many people would be quite happy with that result as it was. Obviously this isn't a traditional camo, but it's not a bad result. Right, so there we go. That was a very quick update. Thanks for listening in, and I'll be updating again probably today with another quick video on a different subject. Thanks, bye.